Thank you for joining us on the Verimour Speaks podcast. I've always worked to provide the most honest, helpful content I could in forms that reach the largest possible audience. And my extreme dislike of greed-driven organizations means I do so without ads or sponsors. But for us to continue improving with better guests and more consistent production quality, we need your help. If you have found any value in what we do and the content provided, please show us a little love by making a contribution directly to the podcast or as a tax-deductible donation on the heroharbor.org website. Thank you again for listening, and please enjoy the show.
Out of suffering have emerged the strongest souls.
Are you comfortable sitting there?
I am perfect. All right. It's all you. Go.
Move that chair.
No, I'm fine. We're good.
See, if I sit in it, I'll fall asleep.
I have a pause button. I'll wait till you wake up.
Yeah. No, we met in high school during the Depression, of course. And Jane was very active in high school. First, I should tell you that her family moved a lot. I was born in a small town called Rumson, which population in 1940, I think, was 1,700 people. But it's one of those where you knew everybody in town. But Jane family moved quite a bit, and I didn't find this out until after. Years later. The reason they moved so much is that her father worked sporadically, and they would live in a house and then not pay the rent after the second month or something, and have to move. But they would move to Fairhaven, which was close by, and children from Fairhaven and Seabright, the small towns around that didn't have the school system, went to Rumson School, high school. So that's where I met her. And she was very active. She ran track, was a drum major and all that. And of course, my circumstances were different than hers. She had a father and a mother. My mother was disabled. My father had died in 1937. So I was in a different social strata, I guess, than Jane was. Jane's family he had been a salesman for a while, so they knew quite a few people around, so I think they had more of a support system, probably with food and lodging, and then I did. I just lived with my mother and my older sister, which is 2 years older than I was. And that's where I met her. I think I told you when we graduated, there was 17 in the graduating class, and they lined us up by height. So Jane and I were at the end because we were the smallest.
And so she was how old when you met her?
I'm sorry?
She was how old when you met her?
Jane was 6 months. She was born in 1922, September 25th, and I was born March 16, 23. So there was a 6 months difference in age, but we were both 15 at the time when I met her. But
okay.
Anyway, and then after I graduated from high school, I lost track of her. We didn't date or anything in school. I just knew her from being in school, but I guess it was in 1939 or 1940, somewhere in there was the big event in town was the volunteer firemen always had a fair where they had roulette wheels and they sold chances and they had games and all that, and that was a fundraiser that they had. Rumson had a fireman's fair, but the town where she lived, Fairhaven, had the largest one. And it one in Rumson, I think, lasted over the weekend, but the one in Fairhaven lasted a week, and it was very popular. People would go there. So somehow I got up to Fairhaven. That's where I met her again, and I was just starting to work, and she was working at Metropolitan Life in New York City. I think she was making $15 a week in those days, but the train fare was something like $6, so it didn't leave much room for fun and games. But I met her there, and we started seeing each other, and it was generally going to the movies or something, nothing comparable to what dating is these days, And then next thing I knew, the Pearl Harbor happened, and that changed everybody's lives. And we had, even though the initial draft was 21 and single, I wasn't registered for the draft, but I had the urge to go in the service because everybody in town was signing up right after Pearl Harbor. I remember a full-page picture in the New York Daily News showing the line snaking around Church Street Naval Recruiting Station in New York City. People just were incensed that the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. Most people didn't know where Pearl Harbor was. Never heard of it before.
Kind of like 9/11. Nobody knew where anything else was, and it made everybody crazy, and everybody joined up. Yep. It's funny how it can bring a country together, huh?
Yeah, so anyway, I tried to join the Marines right away, and I was working, I guess I better go back and tell you that while I was in high school, I didn't know what I was going to do when I finished high school. I was the smallest kid in the class, and only jobs for the uneducated were laboring type jobs, manual labor. Also, the number of kids that went to college in those days were very few. I think out of the 17 in my graduating class, one went to college. She won a scholarship that one of the big landowners in town, a fellow by the name of Borden, used to give a scholarship once a year to the smartest child in the class, and her name happened to be Corrine Felt, and she won it. I forget where she went to school, but most kids didn't get to college, so I was wondering what I was going to do, and I thought perhaps I could get a job as a court stenographer, court clerk or something. So we had a teacher by the name of Madeline Bogart who was, she was like a Marine sergeant. There's no nonsense with her. Either you're going to learn how to be a type and shorthand, or else you're hitting the highway with her. She was very strict. So I learned how to type and could type 65 words a minute, which put me in good stead because when I first graduated from high school, a union representative by the name of Family was very active in the union movement, and Deisler, that name was. Jack Deisler had married the daughter of a union official who lived in Jersey City, New Jersey. And so Roosevelt was coming into power, and he had all these National Recovery, NRA, National Recovery Act. He had WPA, Works Progress Administration. He was trying to put the country back to work. He also had, apparently, he also had an inkling that we're going to be going into war, because he started building up the army bases, and we had two major bases near Rumson. One was in Fort Monmouth, Eatontown, New Jersey, about 15, 20 miles away, which was the headquarters of the Signal Corps for the Army. The other one was a base at the entrance to New York Harbor called Fort Hancock, which had Coast Artillery base. And so, anyway, Jack Deisler, apparently somebody in town, knowing that we were on welfare, which was called relief in those days, which was a very primitive system. You got $5 a week that you could spend in the grocery store, and it had a special checklist of what you could buy. That $5 was to feed my mother, my sister, and me. And then we'd go down once a week in the afternoon after school on Monday, go down, and they would give us this piece of paper that authorized the one store we had in town, which was Acme, I guess. I think it was American Stores or something, but the name was AMC, Acme Store. And then they also would give you one week they give you a bag of potatoes, which had large block letters on it, U.S. government relief, which was, those days there was a stigma attached to being on welfare. Today it's commonplace, but in those days it was embarrassing to ask for help, that's just the way it was. So then another week you'd go down there and they'd give you a bag of powdered milk, which had the same lettering on. I would go down after school and get the chit and get the bag and put it on my shoulder, and I was embarrassed to walk and have people see that. So across the street from the town hall in Rumson was some woods. There was a lake there and some woods. And I used to hide in the woods until it got dark and then walk the rest of the way home, which was about a mile with that. So nobody would say it, but and I couldn't tell you who else was on relief in that town because it was like a state secret or something. Jane's family didn't go through that. In one of their moves, they lived near a chicken farmer in Colts Neck, New Jersey. And they kept them supplied because they had the farm and they had the chickens. It left a mark on her brother, who in later years became a multimillionaire. He was vice president of Merck. Brilliant mind. He went to Bucknell University, graduated a degree in commerce and finance, and then after the war got a master's degree in CPA, and ended up being hired as a vice president of Merck. But anyway, it left a mark on him. He would never eat chicken. I never saw a chicken. But we did eat a lot of clams from the river. And for years I couldn't eat clams. Now they're a delicacy. People that subsided on clams were called clam diggers, and that was a stigma too. But anyway, it just illustrates how society has changed. But anyway, I graduated school. Jack Deisler stopped by the house, and he said that he was the union representative for a laborers' union that they were building up Fort Monmouth, and that he wasn't sure that the contractor would hire me because of my size, and obviously wasn't big enough to be a laborer. He said, but they were using people as plumbers' helpers, and that he would take me to lunch and meet the contractor, and I forget the contractor's name now. It was a big company, but anyway, and he would ask him if, could hire me. I'd have to join the union, so I'd have to pay part of my wages to get pay the initiation fee, like they all do. So he picked me up and we went to lunch. I'd never been in a restaurant in my life at that point. So when the waitress came around and was taking the order, she asked me what I'd like, and I said a lettuce sandwich, because we did have lettuce, and my mother would make bread with the wood stove, so we that was no mayonnaise on it, of course, but anyway, I said lettuce sandwich. So the contractor, the fellow that owned the contracting company, started to laugh, and then Jack Deisler quickly corrected me, and he said, no, bring him something else or something. But whether that show of humility or had an influence on the contractor or not, he said yes, he could hire me as a plumber's helper. So being a plumber's helper was not what you would think. Being a plumber's helper in those days is before they had, the mechanical equipment to dig a ditch or anything. You had to dig the ditch by hand. So what I did was dig ditches, and then they'd put the pipe in, cast iron pipe, and join it together with a fiber called oakum, and then pour lead on it. So I would heat up the lead pot and dig the ditch, heat up the lead pot, do stuff like that. Winter time came, which slowed down the digging, freezing. So that sort of slowed down, and I got laid off. And I didn't know what I was going to do, but I went to the state, in Redback, New Jersey. I went to the state labor office and told them I had been, had a job, been laid off, and looking for employment. And they asked me what I could do. I told them I could type, and he was somewhat surprised because we had such a division of labor in those days. Women were typists, nurses, telephone operators, and males generally didn't type. Anyway, he said, well, that's strange. He said, we had a man here looking for a typist. He said he worked for the Bell system, and I think he hired somebody. He said, well, let me give you his name and phone number, and he lives, he said, on River Street. You know where River Street is? That's where Jane was living. And I said, oh yeah, I know River Street. And so he said, well, give him a call. So I had hitchhiked from Rumson to the labor office, which is 5 miles away in Redback, New Jersey. And then we didn't have a telephone, of course, but in the drugstore where I used to hang out and work occasionally, the druggist. In those days, the druggist was the town doctor, too. We had a doctor, but nobody could afford it. So Bill Fogerson, we called him Doc. You'd go in there with some kind of complaint, and he would examine you, and if you had the money, fine. If you didn't have the money, he would give you bump something. And so anyway, I went down to use Bill Fulgerson's telephone. I hitchhiked back down to Rumson, and I called, man's name was Porter Evans. So I called Mr. Evans up, introduced myself, told him I'd been in the labor office and said I could type. He said, well, I did hire somebody, but he said, I'd like to meet you to have a backup just in case the fellow I hired doesn't work out or something. And he said, I'll be finished dinner about 6 o'clock. Come up to the house about 6 o'clock. So I turned around and hitchhiked back up to Port Evans' house, and maybe had a big glass porch, which was customary in those days, have a wraparound porch with all glass. And Mr. Evans, a very distinguished man, white-haired, and I went in, and he asked me how, where I learned typing and how fast I could type and everything, and what I did, and I told him I had worked as a plumber's helper, but then the winter coming on, I lost a job. So he said, well, you make a nice appearance. Those days, it was the start of that zoot suit period, like we had the hippies go through Phoenix in the 60s, with the long hair and everything. Well, we had similar situation with kids that could afford it. They had big chains, and I don't know whether there was a picture in Life magazine of a zoot suiter, and you wouldn't believe, with the hat and the whole feather in the hat and all that nonsense. But I had a crew cut, and I couldn't afford that. Wear any kind of wear anyway. So I make a nice appearance. He said, where's your car? And he was looking around. I said, I don't have a car. I said, he said, well, how'd you get here? I said, I hitchhiked up from Rumson. He said, you did? He said, what's that, 5 miles away, isn't it? I said, well, actually, it's, I've been here before. I said, I hitchhiked up to the labor office and had to hitchhike back to call you. He said, you've hitchhiked up, now you got to hitchhike back home, that's 20 miles. Wow. I said, yeah. He said, look, anybody's got that kind of ambition serves a job. He said, but the only problem is the job is out in Fort Hancock, which is, good 12, 15 miles from your house. But he said, I've got a solution to that. Do you know a fellow by the name of Glenn Pritchard? And I said, yes, I do. The Pritchard family lives a block away. And I said, he was in class, school, grade ahead of me. He said, well, he's worked for us for a while here. He said, let me call him up. So he called him. And he said, I heard him say to Pritchard, do you know Vic Bond? And he said, yes, He said, well, Glenn, what I want you to do is, I want you to pick him up every morning and take him to work with you. On Monday, he doesn't have security clearance or anything. He says, drop him off at the main gate until I can get him a badge and security clearance. He said, I want you to bring him home at night, pick him up every day. And he said, before long, with the amount of overtime and stuff at work, he'll have enough money to buy his own car. He said, but I want you to do that. You have any problem with that? Pritchard said, no. So then after I got a car, we used to switch back and forth. But so I get to Maygate, Fort Hancock, and of course in those days it's heavily guarded. And Port Evans got me security clearance without, I guess it was the same day or something. And it was Ma Bell was building, or the manufacturing division, Western Electric was building and assembling radar sets, gun director radar for the Army. They made the electronics, they made the antennas, they made the receivers, they made put together the cathode ray tube transmitters. But the framework was made by General Motors, and the ironwork and all that was made by General Motors. And the radar that Western Electric was making was the gun director of radar, and it had a range of 22 miles. So happened that the Floyd Bennett Field, I think that's the field that Lindbergh took off from in Long Island to go to make the famous flight to France. What we would do is we would set up the radar on the beach at Fort Hancock, and the minute the plane took off from Floyd Bennett Field, we could pick it up. It was right at the extent, exactly 22 miles. And what we'd do is we'd track it, flying in over Fort Hancock and at different altitudes, and to check the accuracy of the radar, we had a visual telescopic, there's actually two telescopes mounted on a case, and that was the way, and that was attached to the artillery, and when that moved, the gun would move. That was in sync with that. To check the accuracy of the radar, what they did is they put a dial over the dial, the visual dial, on the visual detector, and a soldier would stand there and note the differences, and then call into a facility where there was a typist, which was my job, and others too, and he would call in what the difference was in readings. We would gaze up at the clock and type, 1031 plus 3, number of degrees off and whatnot. And that's how we tested the accuracy of the radar sets. And each radar set went through that series of tests. And so and we weren't making that much money. In those days, I think if you made $5 a day, it was high pay or something. But we worked quite a bit of overtime. We were limited by the weather too. If it was a cloudy or stormy day or something, and the visual, telescopic mounts weren't effective. But the radar was highly effective. And so I learned how to operate the radar from being there, learned how to assemble it, put the antennas on, and put the receivers on there. And that came in good stead when it came time to go in the Marines. But after we were there about 6 months, each radar, I also kept a logbook on the radar. When it was assembled, serial numbers of the receivers, when they were replaced, it was all, and that was all done in cursive. And so after I went in the Marines, I'm in New Guinea with a new radar set, number 6. This radar set I worked on in Fort.
Wow.
But anyway, number 6. I think we had number 6, 7, and 8. I had worked on all 3 of them. But anyway, after I was there for a while, I was able to save enough money. My mother died. I got a car, and then I used to pick Jane up, and right before they closed down Fort Hancock, right before they closed it down, I was teaching Jane how to drive the stick shift, because all cars were stick shift. She didn't stop the car in time and went up a little embankment and stove in the grill on the 1940 Ford convertible I had bought. And anyway, one day they announced that they're closing down the facility at Fort Hancock because they proved the value of the radar, and what they could do is they could check the accuracy using the parking lot in Kearney, New Jersey, or one of the parking lots in Kearney, New Jersey, and bounce the radar signal off the Empire State Building. And they knew the distance, and so they did that. So I moved to Kearney, New Jersey, and I got a job in the factory, not typing, assembling the radar antennas. And then from that, after a while, I hated that job. The way the tubes, the antenna made, they had plugs on the end, and they had a soldering iron that they had modified so you could put lead on the end of the soldering iron, and then you put the tube and the plug in there and put together, and you bring in all that smoke. It's one of us still alive, I think, any of us. But finally, there was an opening in Bayonne, New Jersey. They were assembling airborne radar then. And since all of us working with anything to do with radar, which was a secret word in those days, had security clearance, so I moved over there, and I took a job in the store. Wonderful experience. Because the airborne radar was small, was compact, and had to fit in the nose of the plane. The company had tests for almost every job they had. In order to be an assembler on airborne radar, you had to pull that chair over there.
I'm fine. Please? No, I'm fine. No, it's not. No, I'm perfectly fine. It's more comfortable for me. No, I'm good. We're good.
So anyway, they had finger dexterity tests, and none of the males could pass the finger dexterity, so they held women there. I had never been exposed to, how can I put that? I came from a town where loudest noise was a car backfiring. The word damn was the worst swear word you could use. I get up there working in the factory, and these gals from the city there, one of the class by themselves, they're as rough as nails, you know? And so that was kind of a
culture shock.
Kind of shocked me, I guess. But anyway, I'm there, and I'm coming home. I get a room up there, in the YMCA in Jersey City for $10 a week. And first time I had been off on my own, because when I was working at Fort Hancock, I was living with my half brother from my father's first marriage that took care of me after my mother died. And then when I went to job moved to Kearney, I left and I got a room in the YMCA and used to take the bus into work. But on the weekends I would come home, and if we weren't working Saturday, I would come home and spend the weekend with him. That's where I was when Pearl Harbor happened. I happened to be in the Ferguson's drugstore at the magazine rack around noontime reading the magazines, and he had a radio on the thing that it said, "This is no drill," when I heard that thing. And then everybody was asking, where's Pearl Harbor? Of course, you know. So I would come home on weekends, and every weekend I came home, there'd be less of my buddies there. They'd all gone, so I really felt the urge to get in the service. So about, I guess it was February or March, I went to my boss, whose name was Harold Cummings, told him I was given a 2 weeks notice. And his response was, you're not even ready for the draft, but working here on airborne radar, you get a deferment from the war, and no reason for you to go in the service. And so he brushed me off or something. So I guess another month went by, and I'd go home, and I'd be the only guy around the drugstore. Everybody else was gone. So went back again and said, "How I'm going to serve." So he said, "Look, if you have 1 year's service with the company, when you come back, you'll have a job." That became law, I think, as the war went on, but those days it was just a company rule. He said, this war isn't going to last forever. Come back, you'll be looking for, along with a gang of other people looking for work. He said, they'll guarantee you a job. So I left again. About 2 weeks went by, came back, and said, "Listen, I've got to go. He said, "Look, will you get the hell out of here?" He said, "You're so damn dumb." He said, "This company will give you 2 weeks to settle your affairs. You don't have to work till June the 18th. And he said, "That's what, 5 weeks away from now?" He said, "Come back 2 weeks before and then leave." He said, "You'll get credit for year's service." And he said, "In the meantime," he said, "you're going to be a pain in the, in the butt." So he didn't miss any words. And me being young and not used to that type of language, I guess, he almost threatened me, He says, "I don't want to talk. I don't want to see you. I don't want to talk to you." To Jennifer. So anyway, 2 weeks beforehand, Jane had, I told you, stove in the front of the car. So when I went to Jersey City, I didn't need the car. I left it there with Glenn Pritchard. He said he would make the payments on it, and I told him he could have the car, made the payments. So I give, just as I'm giving the company 2 weeks notice and I'm leaving, I get a subpoena from the bank. Pritchard never made the payments on the car. And I owed $254, I think it was, on the note. So in those days, Marbell being a very benevolent company, they had a lawyer in benefits. I used to know his name. I remember his first name is Eddie, I went down and showed him the subpoena and everything. And he said, well, there's no way you can get around this. He said they've sold the car at auction, and they that's the money they want back. That's the money they want. He said, well, the company's going to give you 2 weeks' pay for leaving, and it happened to be exact amount. I think it's either 254 or 256. That's what its 2 weeks' pay was. So he made arrangements to pay off the thing. So I leave the company, and it's 2 weeks early. Go up to Church Street Station and to join the Marines. And they find a nodule or something on my back, and I get rejected. And they tell me, it was surprising. It was the start of the war, and they wouldn't take you if you had glasses. They had, I'm not sure why it was. I guess they didn't have the demand or something, but they would be, we had people rejected for flat feet, and then, as the war went on, they'd take you if you had a wooden leg. But I got rejected, and I went to the doctor, and the doctor said it was nothing, he could remove it, but I would have to take a bath to speed up the healing for, I think, 10 days or something. We didn't have a bathtub. So I was back down living with Uncle Tom. I call him Uncle, but he's actually a half-brother. But so I told Uncle Tom what the doctors told me. He said, well, Mrs. Flannery next door has got a bathtub. So the two of us look at Mrs. Flannery's door and say, he said to her, we always call her Mrs. Flannery. He says, Miss Flannery, Vic has got to take a bath. He had some surgery on his back, and he's got to take a bath and soak every day. Is it all right if we use your bathtub? She says, certainly. Now today you can get somebody to knock on somebody's door, and you can get anybody to say, sure.
Right.
So for 10 days I hung around the house and went in. So I go back to Marines and get in the service. So I tell Jane, I'm going, and she was on her way to, her brother had just graduated from Bucknell University, and he had met a girl there. He was a very good-looking guy. Not the first girl he met. It was the second one that he got involved with. He was quite a singer. There used to be a radio program, Fred Waring, his name was, and he had a choral group. Phil actually auditioned for Fred Waring, but when he got to Bucknell, he was a Phi Beta Kappa, and he was also in the choral group there. And then while in the choral group, he met a girl whose name was Treva. We called her Billy. Why don't you sit over there? Take the cushion off there, will you? So anyway, he meets Billy, and Billy's mother is a Debo, and Diebold in those days, I think they're still around. They used to make all the bank safes. Now I think they make ATM. Well, Diebold had married a man by the name of Daniel Poling. Daniel, that was the second marriage. Daniel Poling's wife had died. Daniel Poling was a well-known Baptist minister. He was the editor of the Christian Herald, which was a Baptist paper in the periodical in the United States. He was a confidant of President Roosevelt and Eleanor Roosevelt. He was pastor of the Dutch Reformed Church in New York City. Diebold, Mrs. Diebold, Billy's mother, was a wealthy woman, and Billy was their only child, and Daniel Poling was wealthy in his own right from being well known. So Billy was still in college, and Phil told Jane, why don't you can work in the bookstore at Bucknell and get a degree at the same time, and you can move in with Billy. There was a thought in everybody's mind that he figured, no, it's probably just not true. He figured that it would be better for Billy to have his sister living with him than having another roommate that he didn't know or something. But anyway, so Jane was on her way to Bucknell. I told Jane and I discussed it, and she said she'll wait for me. And so I remember I had $75 left, and I bought a $75 diamond. Told him when I come back I'll buy real stuff, and I did. I bought a 3-carat diamond after I'd been, I gave Jane the 3-carat diamond, and she said it was too pretentious. Patty's got it. She gave it to my youngest daughter. I didn't pay that much for it. The guy was going to pawn it that I was working with, and I said, well, why don't you sell it to me? So he sold it to me for, God, I don't know, now it's probably worth 10 times. I forget what I paid for it. It wasn't that much. But anyway, she said no, she liked this, always wore the $75 one because she thought so highly of it. But anyway, I said, we'll keep in touch. So I took off, and excuse me, in those days, she never knew where I was. She knew when I got to Hawaii, excuse me, but after that, for 2 years, she didn't know where I was. I was in the Pacific, and we couldn't tell. Every mention he made of a palm tree or something, some dopey first lieutenant would get out the scissors and cut out palm tree or something. And Jane said the letters used to look like a Swiss cheese, She had to try to read between the lines. But anyway, I wasn't making that much money. I think in those days, a corporal, I promoted to corporal. First, when I went to boot camp in South Carolina. I don't know how much of this you want to know, but
keep going.
Okay.
I especially like hearing about South Carolina since I was stationed there for 2 years, right? I was stationed there.
Well, when I got
Beaufort, South Carolina, Parris Island.
I got to Parris Island, and
that is so amazing. You and I should go back there one of these days together, just to go take. It has changed. It's changed. Of course, it's changed since you were there, but it's changed since I was there.
I wouldn't know. We lived in Quonset huts in those days, but I remember when we got there, we were greeted by a little small old.
How did you get there? Did you get there on a boat, or did you get there? Did they take you? Did they have a bridge across that they took you on a bus then, or?
I remember being on a train to I think it was Yamasee. I think it was.
But do you remember how you got?
We're on the train. This real salty, short, thin, and he had a face like it was chiseled out of rock. And he'd obviously been in the Corps for. He looked like petrified wood, for God's sakes. But he told us that we were had a new life now, and that we were, we weren't going to be able to write home. We weren't going to be able to communicate with anybody all the time we were there. He said that all the clothes we were wearing will be taken off from you, and you give us an address and we'll mail it back to him. And he said some kids from town here are going to come through with postcards that you can mail, say that you got here safely, and you have to pay them whatever you can, and they'll mail them for you. So we did that, and then we got onto a bus, I believe, and were bussed over to the island. And we got off the bus and we lined up, and I happened to see a fellow from town. What that was Bill's name, last name, Bill, begins with an L. But anyway, this guy had been a weightlifter, and so he was, looked like a young Schwarzenegger, and he was a drill instructor, but he was a private. So he spotted me and came in, and he said, "Oh, I see you made it." I said, "Yeah." I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, I'm a drill instructor." He said, "The minute I got here, they made me a drill instructor, but it was only because he was so muscular, I guess, or something, But anyway, and then we had our two drill instructors. One's name was Cotton, which was appropriate because he had a southern accent, and the other's name was Bakula. But they were both, I think Bakula was a private, Cotton was PFC. But Cotton lined this up, and then he wanted to know if there's anybody, everybody from eastern Mississippi went to Paris Island, West went to San Diego. They were called Hollywood Marines, but anyway.
They still call them that.
Yeah, so he said, wanted to know if anybody was from New York. So we had a lot of guys from New York, they put up their hands. So he pulled them off to one group, and he started raising all kinds of hell on them. That people from New York are wise guys, and they think they're smart, but from now on, you're going to have to, if you want to stay in one piece or something, he had some big spiel about. So then the rest of us, he came up and he asked each one individually where they were from, and this guy's from Ohio, Mississippi, I said New Jersey. And he started raising hell. Why did I go up with us from New York? Because he thought, as far as he was concerned, if you're from New Jersey, you belong in New York. And I just said, well, what's so strange is that people from New York used to call me a farmer because I was born down in the south part of New Jersey, which didn't have the accent. And the minute I opened my mouth, they used to laugh and say, "Oh, you must be a farmer from, So, but as far as Cotton was concerned, I was part of the ilk from New York. So anyway, we go through the rigmarole of boot camp, and about halfway through, incidentally, in our group was a fellow by the name of Peter Ortiz, who became quite famous during World War II. Peter Ortiz had been in the French Foreign Legion and was one of the early candidates for the OSS, and there's been several books written about him. Peter Ortiz went through boot camp. He was waiting to get his commission, and he said he'd go through boot camp just while he was waiting. So the day we graduated from boot camp, he went over to bachelor officer's quarters. In fact, I carried his equipment for him, and we kept in touch for a while. But anyway, while we were going through boot camp before we hit the rifle range, Cotton had us lined up one morning. He says, anybody know anything about ham radio or was a ham radio operator? Nobody put up their hand. So he says, well, I'm taking you to the auditorium. We're going to give you an aptitude test because they need radio operators. So I went to the auditorium, and I remember it was a stage with a screen and a guy with the key, telegraph key, and he was given, what he'd do is he'd click out some Morse code, and then he put it up on the projector, and he kept repeating that. And then he shut off the screen, gave us a piece of paper, and we were supposed to mark down whether it was A, O, or, whatever he was typing, or a number or something. So none of us, I know I didn't, none of us seemed to, after comparing notes afterwards, nobody said they didn't know what the hell any of that was. I said, me neither. So last day of boot camp, when we graduated, he lines us up and he says, Peter Ortiz, of course, had his medals, didn't have his medals, he had cloth medals, a whole chest full of them from the Spanish Civil War and Foreign Legion and everything else. So they told him he was going over the bachelor office quarters and was being commissioned for a second lieutenant, I think it was. He ended up a lieutenant colonel, I know. But anyway, died at an early age, 73. But anyway, he had been wounded several times. Made 40 parachute jumps into occupied France. Could speak French. He was raised in France. But anyway, he said, 3 of you passed the aptitude test. Bond, and I don't know how he did it. It's got to be the hand of God. Yeah. I think back in my life, Dice Leggett takes care of me, Port Evans takes care of me, Cummings takes care of me, and now I passed the aptitude. But anyway, so I'm going to Quantico, Virginia, to radio school. So, we didn't get any time off. Now, after you finish boot camp, they give me time off. So I went immediately up to Quantico. Get up to Quantico, and the first sergeant says to me, were you ham radio operator? What'd you do? And so I said, well, I was, worked in the storeroom, assembling radar sets, and I said before that I worked with the 268 gun director radar. He said, radar? Because nobody used them. He said, you worked on radar? I said, yeah. You know how to operate a radar set? Yeah. So he said, well, I better take you in to see the major. He said, because we don't have people that worked on radar, so takes me into where the major is, and I'm standing outside the door, and he goes in, and then he says to me, come in now and meet the major. And the major was a government inspector down at Fort Hancock. We used to call him Izzy. He was a Jewish fellow. Izzy, I knew him like I know. So Izzy brushes the first sergeant on there, and Izzy says to me, what what the hell are you doing here? And I said, what the hell are you doing here? He said, would you believe it? He said, they made me a major. He said, gave me a commission as a major, and I'm in charge of the radio school. He said, no, he said, I got electrical engineering in degree. I said, no, I didn't know that. Yeah, he says, well, you don't belong in radio school. He says, you belong in radar operator school. So we shook hands, and I went to radar operator school. And I don't know how long he was there. I did get it after I finished radio operator school. We were going to what was then New River. It's now Camp Lejeune. And I remember we loaded the radar sets on flatbed railroad car, and we were, had the rifle, and we were given, cartridge belts with ammunition.